Welcome back to another episode of the Construction Hall of Fame podcast. Today we have on Scott Harris, who is the business unit director for the San Francisco Bay Area at Harris Company. I've been looking forward to having you on the show forever, Scott, and I was pumped when you called me the other week saying you wanted to join me on the podcast. So first of all, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So just to kind of kick things off, as we always do, would you mind giving the audience some context as to how you got where you are in your career today, what your career story looks like up to now?
Yeah, I fell into this world. I never thought I'd be in it. I was working for a small regional general contractor in Virginia right out of college and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. When I got a call that changed my life from a neighbor that grew up down the street from me in Virginia. And he called me and asked me if I wanted to come work for Southland Industries doing the Pentagon renovation. And I could not say no. And that was in 2007. And I just kept growing up the chain from there and ended up here.
Love it. Love it. And it sounds like you made a move recently before you actually came over to join Harris, right? You moved to Texas, is that right?
Yeah, I spent 3 years in Texas working for TD Industries. I kind of felt topped out at Southland as a senior PM and wanted more responsibility. So I went and took an operations manager role down there. That was a great experience. I loved it in Austin, but couldn't turn it down when Harris called me and asked me to come run this business unit.
Perfect transition. What inspired you to take over the business unit for the Bay Area at Harris?
You know, as I was coming up through the years and running projects, I really figured out that my passion was growing people, training people, and building high functioning teams. And the best way to do that is to run your own division. You get total control over who your team members are, how they're trained, how they're treated. And I could really put everything I learned over the years to work, grooming a group here in the Bay.
And so taking that experience, growing into a senior PM with Southland, and then becoming an ops manager out in Texas, it sounds like that blend of skill sets is really what allowed you to come in and hit the ground running with Harris. Was it a good blend of learning and leadership?
It was. It was having the technical experience from the field, doing a high volume of design build work, highly technical work here in the Bay Area, and then really learning how to deal with people. I had some great mentors along the way to show me, how to lead people and how to do it. And it took me about a year to make that transition from being a project-specific focused contributor to a leader of other project managers leading the entire division. And then, without that experience, I would have never been able to step into this role. When you go from a project narrow focus to a enterprise focus, it's a difficult transition at times. Learning how to deal with everything that's going on and then looking ahead for what's coming, right? Even in project management, you got to look around the corner. But when you move higher than that, you're looking months down the road and sometimes even years down the road, trying to prepare for a moment in time that hasn't come yet.
Interesting. If you were to go back to when you just first started as the business unit director, what advice would you give yourself based on the learning curve that you've gone through?
That's a hard question. Dig in more into the weeds. When you're taking over a business unit, and this could be even as something as small as, say you're a project manager, you're taking over a project. Dig deep into the weeds. You gotta find out where all the bones are buried. What is hiding in the background? What invoices or costs are out there? What mistakes were made 4 years before you got there? 3 years before you got there, because they exist. They're there somewhere.
Right. And it sounds like for a company who'd be looking to employ a business unit director and bring on a high-level executive like yourself, part of the job to equip someone like you to become successful early on would be to actually reveal some of these things in the process to help prepare you. And as a higher level piece of the leadership team, it's like know what's going on from your perspective as well, so you can inform a Scott Harris of the world what to expect when they get in there, what type of challenges they'll be tackling, and really to get a more transparent feel for the landscape instead of having someone come in and have to figure all of that themselves. Is that a pretty fair assessment right there?
Yeah, anytime you can, you want there to be a transition process with the previous leader. Obviously, that's not always possible. And a lot of the times, if someone like me is being hired, it's because the last person was removed. I did have a 6-month overlap. That was the nice thing. However, that person was mostly remote, and he hadn't been here that long either. Harris in the Bay Area is 4 years old as of this year. So there were things going back to the previous company that we acquired here that were still lurking in the background.
How'd they find you?
A headhunter just like yourself. Yeah, and then it goes back to, somebody knew somebody else, right? The headhunter originally called my ex-boss in Texas who had recently left and asked him if he was interested, and he said no. But he's like, well, I know someone who might be. And he knew that I had come from the Bay Area, so he was like, would you be interested in going back? Perfect timing, perfect place, perfect timing. So it worked.
Some of our best candidates come from referrals, whether it be a company like yourself who's hiring a headhunter like me who goes out there and finds talent. A lot of the time, referrals. I mean, I think the stat is 80% of top talent finds their next position through a referral. They're not applying on job boards. They're not actively looking, right?
And it was funny that, the headhunter found me, but in our world, especially in mechanical, the world is so small. So immediately, once my name was revealed, they were calling everybody I know, both from Virginia, from California, from Texas. It's like 2 degrees of separation for any candidate. So we're able to, make phone calls and say, what do you know about this person? How do they perform? How do they act? And know a lot about them. We don't need someone to give references.
Right. Yeah, it opens up the call so much for me as a headhunter when I'm able to call and say, hey, I just had a call with Scott Harris. I actually just placed him with a great company. I know you're connected to Scott. Maybe Scott suggested I reach out to you. Maybe I've heard great things about your work over the years. Your name was brought up. Are you open? Would you want me to keep some eyes and ears out there for you? It makes them, as a candidate, so much more open to the conversation versus a normal cold call or a cold email. So to your point, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, and go, to expand on that, I would have never spoke to Harris if the person that referred me hadn't told me what a great company they were. They said, hey, you need to talk to this company. They treat their employees well. They're a great company. They're growing. They're expanding. They're doing exciting things. They're working on exciting projects. You should be a part of this. And I was someone I trusted telling me that. So I was eager to take the call.
Makes a lot of sense. So obviously you're building out something in the Bay Area that is rather new. It's 4 years old, but you're taking stride. How are you differentiating Harris from other mechanical contractors in the Bay?
So Harris's mantra is to be a trusted partner. And we take that very seriously. And it's honestly a mantra that resonated with me and was, a reason why I felt comfortable coming to work here. We aren't worried about maximizing profit on this particular project. We are looking for long-term relationships. We are looking for repeat business. And then we also take that internally. We're trying to be trusted partners internally and treat our employees with the respect they deserve. We're trying to be cognizant of their workload, of work-life balance, cognizant of their flexibility and being able to spend time on the job site and work from home when they need to or work remote when they can. Obviously, you can't run a project 100% remote. The top performers know that. So we don't have to convince them of that. It's a give and take. And we differentiate ourselves by being aware of that and not being hungry to take on the most volume of any contractor and take on the right projects and not trying to squeeze our partners for every dollar and cent that we can get out of them.
Going for that partnership, focusing on the go, no go strategy, what projects make sense for you to take on, what projects don't make sense for you to take on, being cognizant of your team's workload, being aware as a leader, am I overworking these people? Am I stretching these people? Where can I support them? It sounds like it's a blend of picking the right clients, treating the clients well, and then also taking really great care of your team members.
Saying no is a very powerful thing. You have to be honest with the external partners and the internal partners about what's going on, and that's how you get everybody moving in the same direction.
Love it. So, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges you face in the mechanical contracting industry, and how do you work to overcome those?
The biggest issue, and we've talked about this before, is a lack of skilled project management. They're the hardest people to find, and even when you can find someone that has some experience, they're often missing big components of the work. At Harris, we do mechanical, plumbing, and process piping, and often we find people that have experience in one but not the others, or they've worked in MEP on a general contractor side, and they've never ran direct labor before, never ran the manufacturing portion of our shop, sheet metal and piping. So it's very hard to find the well-rounded talent that we need to succeed. That way, when we do find them, we hold on tight. When MEP systems go into a building, we affect every other trade, and they all affect us. And it takes someone that's very well rounded to understand all of those interactions about what can go wrong and then how to correct it, and then take the lead in that correction. If we have someone who's just going to sit back and let things happen, then we're being reactive, and that's not going to be good for anybody. That's not being a trusted partner.
So, being proactive and recruiting and retaining great project management talent, it sounds like are two of the biggest challenges that you're facing.
Yeah. And I don't think it's just me. I think it's an industry-wide problem.
Yeah, it's almost every construction company out there is struggling to recruit and retain great talent. Whether you're at the very top of the ENR list or you're a small to medium sized contractor, it's a struggle. And that's why, people who recruit and retain top talent like Harris, who do it well, they still talk about it as a challenge. It's just the size of the challenge and what type of problem are you looking to solve at the end of the day. So, I mean, I've enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you because you take this seriously. You take talent acquisition seriously. One day when we were on the phone, you said, I always think 5 years ahead of now. So that means you're willing to talk to a project manager to build a relationship. You don't need to hire them today. You want to actually get in the trenches to build that relationship with people so they think of Harris when the time comes. That really struck me when you said that because, believe it or not, I work with a lot of construction companies, and not very many construction leaders have that mentality that you have of having interviews when it's not, in the pressing need or you need them in the moment. It's something that I think really stands out about you as a leader. And I think for that reason, and obviously other reasons, Harris is lucky to have you leading the business unit. But let me ask you this.
I appreciate
Oh,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah, we talk about planting seeds all the time, and that's both recruiting and business development, right? You never want to close the door on a relationship because you never know when it's going to pay off for you. That one conversation you have, I have a great story actually. One of my main project execs, I made him an offer from a Zoom call, just like we're having right now, after meeting him for 30 minutes. And he ended up not taking the job, but we left such an impression on each other. 6 months later, he came back and came to work for me. Just literally dropping seeds, planting seeds, because you never know.
In other words, don't burn the bridge either. Plant those seeds, don't burn a bridge. Don't be desperate for now business or now talent. Build those relationships because if you're planning to be in the Bay Area, like I'm sure you are for the foreseeable future, then you never know what happens. You never know what client gets tired of working with a company. You never know what candidate gets tired of working with a company. And if you plant that good impression, people will remember those things. So, I mean, cheers to that.
You also never know who you're going to work for. This person that you're interviewing might be your customer one day.
Good point. So, what have been some of your best strategies to actually solve the challenge we're talking about and go out there and recruit and retain top talent?
Well, that's a multifaceted approach. Working with headhunters like yourself is obviously a big piece of that. Internships and college recruiting is the other big piece because if we can't find them, then we have to build them. Get them out of college, train them the right way, give them the experience they need, give them strong, solid mentors, and give them an enjoyable experience when they come to work every day. When you're talking about retaining talent, it's, being honest and upfront about what the expectations are, what the metrics they're going to be graded on are. Give them a say. Give them a say in what's going on. Give them a say and an open door to leadership to voice their opinions, and care about them as individuals. Ask them how their day's going. Talk to them about their home life. Make sure that they're in a good place mentally at home so that when they come to work, they're able to give you their best.
Yeah, a lot of what you said, it's easier said than done. Some companies talk a big game, but then when you actually show up, it's a totally different world than what they portrayed in the interview process, what they told the recruiter. So I think what you said is so important. Make expectations meet reality. Have an interview process that's transparent. Tell them about what they're getting into. Let them know the challenges they'll face. Let them know what you are looking for and what you're not looking for. When someone shows up, they're not like, "Hey, I thought this company had great work-life balance and I was going to be working on these projects, but I show up and there's no backlog and nobody talks to me." And it's like, I don't get along with my team because the expectation wasn't set properly up front. So what you said is perfect. I think it's something that people need to take notes on, quite honestly, because a lot of the time when you see turnover, it's because there was this big game talk during the interview process and it was all hype. And then you find out later on that the candidate was mistreated or the opportunity was misrepresented or they weren't really ready for the challenge because they weren't told about the challenge coming in. So they couldn't tell them that they weren't actually equipped to solve the problems you're looking to solve. So I think what you said is a great point for people to take notes on.
You have to be as honest as possible because you never want to be the leader who gets accused of misrepresenting something during the interview process. That would be terribly embarrassing for me as a leader. Especially so. Harris. We're 4 years into the Bay. We've had to be very honest with people about the last few years being in startup mode, getting off the ground, ironing out simple processes, developing backlog. I share all of those things when I'm in an interview process. I tell them exactly what our backlog is, exactly what projects we're working on, how they're doing, how many people we have in the field, anything that they want to know. And I try to get them to meet as many of their teammates as possible.
That right there, meeting with teammates is huge too, because you can get along great with Scott Harris, but what if you don't get along great with the people you're working alongside in the trenches? What if there's things you could actually flesh out during the interview process to say, "Hey, Scott loved you, but the rest of our team, for some reason, just wasn't the right fit," right? And so I think it's great that you involve your team members as well. That's a thorough hiring process right there. And from day one, you told me your hiring process is thorough.
I've interviewed people that I loved, and my project execs and my senior PMs are like, no, that person's not going to fit, and that matters. And if you don't listen to your leaders when they tell you that, and you hire them anyway, you just degraded trust.
And on top of that, to piggyback on what you said about being in startup mode, from my perspective, depending on who you are, what an exciting time to be a part of the company at the end of the day, right? There's so much opportunity for growth. You have a forward thinking leader like yourself. When I talk to people in the market about Harris, they say, "Oh, I've heard they have a team full of A players." Like they know you have great people on board, a great culture you're building, and you work on very interesting projects. So being on the ground level of something like that not only gives you the opportunity to have a really cool impact during your career, but to grow with the business unit. Look at your company's national presence. Nobody's doubting that you have the backing and the company presence to thrive. But at the end of the day, getting on the ground level with something like this is actually different than getting on the ground.
That's what I saw.
Go ahead.
That's what I saw when the recruiter called me to come here. I was like, okay, big national contractor making a new office in the Bay Area. Like, there's only upside, really. We have a company that has, we're scratching at $1 billion in revenue. We're working on mega projects all across the country with big national general contractors and national clients. That's only going to come to the Bay, and it already is paying off. We're getting work based on relationships that came from Virginia or Seattle or Minnesota, that they're calling and saying, "Hey guys, would you look at this? Because our client here is doing something in San Francisco or doing something in San Jose. Can you help them out?" And that's paying dividends already.
Let's piggyback on that. Talk about the challenge of finding great project managers. what is your company's unique value proposition for a candidate, for a project manager who might be considering a move or maybe isn't considering a move but might be compelled to if they heard the right message? If I'm a project manager, why would I choose to join Harris from your perspective?
It's the culture. Harris was started in St. Paul, Minnesota. And people talk about Minnesota nice and the Midwest nice. It's real. It's like Southern hospitality. People talk about that. Is it real? Yes, it's real. Southern hospitality is real. Midwest nice is real. And it permeates throughout the culture. One of the biggest things I came here, I was within my first 2 or 3 months. And I'm trying to get the shop off the ground, and I'm trying to get all of our staff organized. And I make a call back to a couple of guys in St. Paul at our headquarters, and I say, what would you do in this situation? Not only did they answer the phone and give me their advice, they flew out here the next week. They jumped on a plane. They said, let me come look at it. No questions asked. No like, hey, I'll get there in a couple months. No, I'll be there next week. I'll help you out. And one of that was simple as just a shop layout. Like we wanted to reorganize our shop, and I said, let's come out and look at it. It's really fun to like have a company that is so well connected across divisions, so that anytime you need help or advice, it's there. And we have 9 shops across the country. They're all helping each other to get better every day.
And on top of that, depending what company you come from, your company is siloed in some ways in the Bay Area, meaning you have an estimating team, you have people doing BD, you have an operations team. I know other mechanical contractors in the Bay Area who it's kind of sink or swim at the end of the day, right? There's some people there who are making it rain, making millions of dollars a year, and other people don't have the support they need, and they find themselves like kind of struggling in those type of situations where they might not know that a Harris of the world would give them all the support they need to go execute projects and including the backlog.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I've been at places where it's sink or swim. You're either doing well or you're not, and if you're not, you're out. And some companies treat divisions that way, where it's more of a holding company, and you report your financials at the end of the year, and either you did well or you didn't, and that's it. They'll cut you loose if you're not doing well, but they're not there lending support in the background. So I feel very fortunate to have that.
Yeah, and I know other people do too. I've heard some people talk to me specifically from a couple companies in the Bay, and they expressed that they aspired to be leaders, and they built themselves up, and they built this team up underneath them. And all of a sudden, years later, when they changed the type of projects they were working on, they had built this team underneath them. They had invested into them, mentored them, brought them up through the ranks, and then all of a sudden, there was an exodus in the company, right? Just because people didn't fit a specific silo in the company to help them move forward, or a specific specialty, if you will. And that crushed the leader's morale. He's like, I just built all these people up and now they have to leave the company. But, from you on the flip side, you talk about mentoring from the bottom up in many situations and actually bringing people up through the ranks, which, I mean, if anyone's thinking about a leader and being with a team who will actually support their team for the long haul, it definitely sounds like Harris is that type of company from everything I've heard in the market from you.
Yeah, when you can get into an organization from day one and grow in it, it's best for everyone. You understand the nuances of the day-to-day business. You understand how to use the technology systems. The relationships, and construction is hugely a relationship business. When you're running jobs as a project manager, knowing who your general foremen are that are your leaders on the field side, that's probably the most important relationship that you can have in our business. If those two people are clicking, then that project will be successful. Yeah, we're doing everything we can to build people from the bottom up, and then giving them a chance to take on as much as they can as responsibility, and giving them options to grow and build their own teams around them.
Love it. So, from your perspective, what would you say are the most important qualities to define a successful business unit leader?
So the first thing is caring for your people. You probably wouldn't get that as a first answer from a lot of leaders, but I like to look at myself as at the bottom of the org chart, and I'm working for those people who report to me. with the most important people in our world being the installers out in the field. Everything we do has got to feed up to them and support them in being more efficient in their role. Because without them, we make no money and there's no reason to have a business unit leader at all. You have to make your people feel supported. You have to get them engaged in the details. You have to include them in decision making and be honest with them and give them a clear path for growth. If you can do those things as a leader, you should be successful.
So interesting how a lot of the time when I speak to really great leaders, the majority of what they talk about when we talk about what attributes to their success is how can I help other people succeed? How can I help take great care of my people? And at the end of the day, like, yeah, you want to help, do other things in the business operationally, deal with clients, all that good stuff. But if you're not pouring into your team's a reflection of you as a leader at the end of the day. And the team you build is a reflection of you as a leader at the end of the day as well. So makes a lot of sense.
And how they treat people is a reflection of you. So it's not just how you treat them, but then they have to pay that forward and treat other people that way. So you have to set the example.
That's deep right there. I love it. Great stuff. So, I guess, how's the industry changed, the mechanical contracting space over the years, and how do you see Harris keeping up with these changes?
Well, the coolest thing, I'm a big believer in design build. And from the time I got into the industry, starting out in design build, because that's what Southland focuses on, I've seen it blaze a trail throughout the country. Um, the Bay is the third market I've worked in. Um, Design build is becoming more and more prevalent. Owners are starting to see the downfalls of the traditional plan spec project process. Design bid build ends up riddled with errors because the person designing it oftentimes is not even close to the project. It's definitely not boots on the ground. And that just leaves room for mistakes where in a design build world, you're putting the installing contractor and the engineer often shoulder to shoulder. You close a lot of the gaps up front before they are able to affect the project in the field. Harris is keeping up because so 4 years ago, they started right around the time Harris Bay Area started, they created a national design studio. It's actually headquartered here in Oakland, but it services the entire country. We also have an office in Minnesota and another office in Virginia, filled up with engineers to support these regions. And we're bringing the expertise and of the consulting engineering world, combining that with design build history of project managers that we've assembled here in the Bay Area. We're giving a new flavor of design build. We're really trying to be the trusted partner and bring that trusted technical approach. Maybe the conceptual design isn't the best approach, but we're going to give you options to say, okay, maybe we do it this different way.
And it seems like it might be harder to do that if you're having the design bid build approach because there's such a disconnect and there's a lot of back and forth. Whereas with you in house, you're working directly with each other. You have a team who can communicate with each other frequently. There's a lot less curveballs and there's more accommodation for the clients who you serve to help them achieve their goals in the best way possible.
Yeah, a lot of the times when you're doing a plan and spec project, you have a question, you're not allowed to call the engineer. You turn in a piece of paper, a little 8.5 by 11 with maybe some backup documentation, and you throw it over the fence and you wait. And oftentimes that wait is 2 weeks, contractually 10 business days. In design build, you have an issue, you either walk over to the engineer's cube or you at least pick up the phone and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. Do you have a second to come look at this? Can you walk the project with me? You don't get that access in a traditional plan spec world.
Makes a lot of sense. Most definitely. So let's talk about this for a second. What advice would you give to someone who is just starting out in the mechanical contracting space? They're ambitious. They want to build a successful career. What would your 2 cents be on advice to help them build a strong career?
The first thing I would say to anyone, and this is kind of regardless of your profession, but ask a million questions. The people who report to me, I judge them off of the questions they're asking. And it's not because I think less of them for asking questions. I actually think more of them. One, it lets me know where their head's at, how they're prioritizing their task. And then I ask them to always come with a possible solution. So that, okay, maybe if you don't know the answer, you think you might have an answer, let's talk about it and let's see what you're thinking. So that I'm not giving you the end result, but I'm giving you bumper rails so that you aren't going to have some big failure or big mistake. If you're a young person coming in, we already know that you don't know anything. You know, you have your college degree, which gives you a general understanding of how systems work, especially if you're a mechanical engineer, or if you're construction management, you have a general understanding of the cycle of a project. But you don't have any real world experience. So we want you to ask questions. And then the other thing is seeking out mentors. Really look for people that you admire and then ask them to spend some time with you on a regular basis. You know, maybe it's monthly. Maybe once a month you go to lunch with someone that you respect and that can help guide you along your path. Continually seeking out more responsibility. As a leader, you want young people to come in and say, what more can I do? Hey, I finished this task. What's next? And over time, if you keep doing that, you're going to keep getting more responsibility because, as you know, every construction company in America needs more people. The people who continue to take on more responsibility are going to shoot up the org chart and eventually find themselves in a leadership role.
So in other words, you give people the ability to become problem solvers by, like you said, giving them those bumper rails. And then again, you would encourage them to seek out more problems to solve and figure out how they can add more value by being proactive in the organization to continue seeking, how can I help? How can I be a good team member who helps push things forward? And at the end of the day, if you keep doing that, then a lot of times you might not even have to ask for raises. You might not have to ask for promotions. People are going to want to promote you because you're solving their problems and you're making their life easier and you're helping push projects along and being a positive impact on the culture.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Well, hey, just to kick things off or finish things off, what are some of the future plans for Harris that you're excited about? How does the future in the Bay Area look, and how do you plan to achieve these goals that you have coming up?
Well, the future's bright here. You couldn't ask for more opportunity in any region in the country, which is what makes the Bay Area unique. And I think that's why a lot of people end up coming here. The opportunity is boundless. We have, a big, hairy, audacious goal to be a top 3 mechanical in the Bay Area, both in volume and net income. And we do that by being a trusted partner and getting repeat business. Delivering quality to our customers and showing them that they can trust us to work with us. We're going to not only complete your project, but we're going to do it so well that the owner loves it, that we're delivering quality every day, and we're actually a pleasure to deal with, which not everyone is. So we won't get there overnight. It'll take years to get there, but we will get there.
Well, I'll tell you what, Scott, you've definitely been a pleasure to deal with every step of the way. I really enjoyed to get to know you, to work together, and really to understand what you're all about. And, like you said, as long as you're, equipping your team and coaching your team to become a reflection of yourself, I wouldn't be surprised if a few years down the road, we're looking at Harris as one of the top 3 in the Bay Area. And, cheers to everything you're building. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, for joining me, for sharing some wisdom with the community. I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure.
Of course. And hey, if anyone's listening to this podcast and you're a great project manager, or maybe you're a killer project executive or a young project engineer, I suggest you reach out to Scott. Scott, like I said, true pleasure through and through. I've heard nothing but good things about him in the community. Great team to be a part of. So give Scott a shout if you're thinking about possibly seeing what's available at Harris. So again, great to have you on, Scott, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Matt.